to this Bible study of the Banking Blessings Ministry. My name is Goodluck Ofebu. This is my wife.
Okay, Ofebu.
We welcome you to our continuing study on husband-wife interactions. Today we are going to look at an important interaction between God and Abraham, in which God discussed his promise to Abraham, promise to mankind, promise to human beings through Abraham, and expectations, his expectations of Abraham, his expectations of other human beings through the discussion with Abraham. So this is often referred to as the covenant between Abraham and God on behalf of Abraham and the rest of human beings, human race. But what we're really interested in here is to see how through this interaction, to see how God, what comes through about how God considers the relationship between Abraham and his wife Sarah. As we have seen in the past, God interacted with Abraham and Sarah, but physically with Abraham, because he considers Abraham and Sarah to be one in God. That is, he considers a husband and wife to be one, to be a unit. But we're going to see a specific illustration of that, because in the interaction, in making the covenant, we will see that the covenant was really, let me not jump into it. We are going to see how Sarah was brought into the discussion, even though Sarah was not physically a participant in the discussion. Before we proceed, I don't know if my wife has an opening statement about this study.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will learn that through this interaction, we'll see an illustration of God relating to a husband and wife, but physically in this particular case only with the husband. And the words used when he needed to talk to Abraham and Sarah, he just talked to Abraham as if he was talking to one person. When he needed to talk about something specific to Abraham, we will see. And when he needed to talk about something specific to Sarah, we will see how he did it. But when he needed to talk about both of them, there isn't an explicit mention of, he talked to Abraham as if it was one person, as if he was talking to one person. But it is obvious that in talking to that one person, he was actually talking to a unit that is made up of a husband and a wife. And his communication with the one person was sufficient communication with the unit. We will get our information regarding this from Genesis 17, where God discussed his covenant with Abraham, discussed his promise and Abraham's commitment, or his promise and his expectations of Abraham. Well, we know that actually previously there had been an interaction where God introduced his promise to Abraham. In fact, the promise was discussed first in Genesis chapter 12 when he made the call, and then in chapter 15 where the covenant was introduced. But in chapter 17 we see a clear discussion of the covenant, of the interaction with God, in which God told Abraham what he will do for Abraham and all those that are covered by the covenant through Abraham, and what he expects Abraham and all those covered by the covenant to do for him. So the covenant is a conditional promise. This is what I will do for you, and this is what I expect you will do for me. And if you do that, then I will do. If you do that faithfully, of course you can expect that he will do his own faithfully. So this was what happened between Abraham and God, that as discussed in Genesis chapter 17. We will start our reading with the first 2 verses, and then we'll discuss some more and then read the rest of it as we go along.
Genesis chapter 17, reading from the New King James Version, verse 1. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am Almighty God, walk before me and be blameless. Verse 2, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly.
Well, so God in this interaction stated what he expected from Abraham and what he would do for Abraham. But first of all, let's look at what he expects from Abraham, or what he expects from man, from human race, from human beings, as he revealed to Abraham. And it's really in the statement where he said, walk before me and be blameless. Essentially, he's telling us to worship and serve him. And for Abraham, he said he gave a sign of the covenant. The covenant at times is called covenant of circumcision. Well, circumcision really is a symbol of the covenant, and this is stated in the passage, said that every male as a symbol of the covenant, every male in your household will be circumcised, every male that is 8 days old or older. Okay, so here he talked about his expectations that we worship and serve him, and that's the meaning of walk before me and be blameless, and that every male born to Abraham's family will be circumcised to symbolize the conditional promise, to symbolize Abraham's commitment to God, to symbolize the covenant. We've already read Genesis 17 verse 1. The covenant, the circumcision part of the covenant, the circumcision as a symbol, is discussed in verses 9 through 14. But we'll read 9 and 10 because that just captures God's expectations as described through this interaction with Abraham.
Genesis 17, verse 9. And God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised.
Okay, and if you read down the other verses, he explained that this is a symbol of the covenant. Circumcision is not the covenant, but the symbol, something to signify this interaction that God had with Abraham. But for today, what we really want to understand is, because this lesson is about husband-wife interactions or husband-wife relationships, and what we really want to learn from here is how God considers the relationship between husband and wife as revealed in this interaction with Abraham. And we will find, I'm just stating what we're going to see, but we'll see it later as we go on. We will find that when he's interacting with Abraham, he refers to Abraham as you, and that the word you actually means Abraham and Sarah, Abraham, Sarah, or Abraham and Sarah as a unit. Now, there is a context to this, and we'll see the context where it clearly means Abraham and Sarah as a unit, and we see a context where he was talking to something specific to Abraham. So in that case, you refers to Abraham. And there is a context where he was talking about something specific to Sarah. And in this case, you or you are refers to Sarah. But we will pick out the context where it is very clear that he was using the word you when addressing Abraham, to actually refer to you and your wife as a unit, you and Sarah as a unit. So you means, in that context, you means Abraham, Sarah, and your descendants means descendants of Abraham, Sarah. Let's proceed and we'll pick this out. Now, we'll see this by looking at, first, we'll see God's expectation of Abraham, what he expects Abraham to do. Basically, that Abraham, his descendants, and all those covered by the covenant should worship and serve him. Now, this is what he gives in his own side of the promise of the covenant, is that he will be God to you. Will be God to you and your descendants. We will read this from the passage, but you see that in this particular case, when he said, will be God to you and your descendants, he was actually referring to you as Abraham, Sarah, as a unit. Then descendants of that unit. Of course, he will make you exceedingly fruitful. The same thing, you referring to a unit. Father of many nations, or father and parents, I will refer to this when he says father of many nations. Of course, there was a specific time when he talked about Sarah, said mother of many nations, kings will come from her. But when he was talking to Abraham, describing his promise, that is his side of the covenant, his side of the conditional promise, when he said, when he mentioned the word you was referring to the unit that Abraham represented. And that unit is the unit of husband and wife. So you and your descendants, you will be father of many nations, or parents of many nations. And of course, specifically to Abraham, say your name will be changed from Abram to Abraham. And I will give you ownership, everlasting ownership of the land of Canaan. And then the wife, specifically to Sarah, said the wife Sarah shall bear a son. And let us read about this, because it's clearer as we go through the various verses of the Bible, and then we can explain a little more as we go along. We'll look at Genesis 17 verses 3 to 8 and 15 to 21. This is God's conditional promise, or God's side of the covenant.
Genesis 17 verse 3. Then Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. Verse 6. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you.
Well, this is one of those cases where it's clear that God was talking about Abraham and Sarah, because a man, how is he going to make a man fruitful? I'll make you exceedingly fruitful, and I'll make nations of you. That he was really referring to a unit that of course consists of Abraham and his wife being Sarah. So when he said, I will make you exceedingly fruitful, we can paraphrase this to say, I will make Abraham, Sarah exceedingly fruitful. And I will make nations of you means I will make nations of Abraham, Sarah. And kings shall come from you means kings shall come from Abraham, Sarah. So in verse 6, God used whoever wrote it, used the word you to represent a unit that consists of Abraham and Sarah, a unit that consists of husband and wife. God referred to that unit as if it was one person, because he considers this unit to be one. He considers husband and wife to be one. Let us read the next verse.
Verse 7. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and your descendants after you.
This last phrase, to be God to you and your descendants after you. Well, look at what is happening here. Is that immediately God is saying, I'm making a covenant with you, and you are representing your descendants after you. Well, if you means Abraham here, then somebody will ask, where is Sarah in all of this? But the reason that Sarah is not mentioned is because the word you in this sentence actually includes Sarah. So when we say to be God to you and to be God to your descendants after you, one can paraphrase that to say to be God to you as Abraham, Sarah, and to be God to the descendants as of Abraham, Sarah. So you in this interaction refers to a unit that consists of Abraham, Sarah, a unit that consists of husband and wife. But God, in interacting with Abraham here, was also interacting with Abraham and Sarah, because he considers Abraham and Sarah as one. He considers husband and wife as one unit. So he could just talk to one as if he's talking to both of them. He's talking to both of them, but physically it may be only one person at that particular time. Okay, let's continue reading.
Genesis 17 verse 8. Also I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Then God said to Abraham, verse 15, then God said to Abraham, as for Sarah your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall be from her. And Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 99 years old,
90 years
old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. Then God said, no, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. Verse 20. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this set time next year.
Okay. So that was God's explanation of his side of the covenant, his conditional promise. First, he described what he expected from Abraham and from all the beneficiaries of the promise through Abraham. Then he explained what we expect from him. Basically, that if we worship and serve him, then he will be our God. But as he relates to our lesson, where we understand how God considers a husband and wife is by looking at who is included in the covenant. We already saw that in one of the verses we read. He said, in the covenant, God talked about you and your descendants after you, and you there was no mention, no specific mention of Sarah. Say, look, if God considers Sarah a different person, he would have said, okay, I'll be God to you, I'll be God to your wife Sarah, I'll be God to your descendants. But he just said, I'll be God to you and your descendants. And because you, in that expression, refers to Abraham, Sarah as a unit. So who is included in the covenant? Abraham, Sarah, as the basic unit that God interacted with to discuss the covenant. Descendants of Abraham, Sarah, that the children that will be born to them through Isaac. Isaac was not yet born, but they were going to get a son. He told them there they were going to have a son, Isaac, and the covenant will be established through Isaac. So descendants of Abraham through Isaac. Then, as we saw in a previous Bible study, all those that are beneficiaries of the Messiah promise, where it says all the families of the world, all the peoples of the world will be blessed through you. So all the beneficiaries of that promise are also covered by the covenant through Abraham. And what that covenant is saying, that he will be God to all that worship and serve him. That's basically what it is in a nutshell. He will be God to all that worship and serve him. As he relates to our lesson, Sarah was not mentioned explicitly in who is included, because Sarah is part of what God referred to as you, which is Abraham, Sarah as a unit. And that's what we learned today, really. It's a lesson that just focused on recognizing that when God interacted with Abraham to explain his covenant, that he was interacting with Abraham, Sarah, through Abraham, interacting with the husband and wife unit through the husband.
It's very. God has always seen the institution of marriage. The man and the wife is one. That's why he said, for this cause shall a man leave his mother and father and shall be, cleaved unto his wife. and the two shall become one. So it's not something that is being made up. It's something that it's an institution that God Himself ordained, and it's a clinging. It's something that God Himself designed, and that is like the bedrock of the bedrock of marriage, the institution of marriage. And what is important here is that Abraham, he may or may not have understood that when God was giving him the promise of the covenant, that it was him and his wife, because we could see somewhere he did understand that, because he said in his heart, how can a man who is 90 years old, 100 years old, father a child, and a woman who is 90 years old, be the mother of a child? But that kind of, it made him, pushed him also towards the same mistake they were making earlier on. They had made a mistake earlier on by begetting Ishmael, by trying to act out God's promise, or act out the God's intention for God, but through a different means that is not in the plan of God. And that was why Sarah took Hagar and gave to Abraham. He was going the same way, because when he put this doubt in his mind, he was telling God, please let Ishmael live. It's like, God, bless it, let it be Ishmael. Okay, because despite Ishmael, God was still promising him a child. And God, at this point, had to become more explicit. It was at that point that God dissected it and said, your wife Sarah will give you a son. Your wife Sarah. So all along, God has been speaking to them as to him, to them as one, but through Abraham. But because he was still not understanding it, God had to dissect it, and actually to remove the doubt in his mind, or the unbelief, or the lack of understanding, let me call it that way. God had to become more explicit and said the same things that God has said about kings coming, he will be the father of nations. Now God said, Sarah will be the mother of nations. Kings will come from, she will be the mother of kings. Okay? So it's like explaining it further, that it's you and Sarah. And that's why in the previous passage I had highlighted something very important, that God needed the union of Abraham and Sarah for the child of promise to show up. If Sarah had not chosen her marriage to Abraham, if that marriage had fallen apart, maybe there would be no Isaac. God required that union, because it was that union that had become one. It was that union that the child of covenant would come from. So it's a very important thing. What does this show us? That sometimes the revelation of what God wants to do in a marriage will come through the man or the wife. But we should see it as not, oh, God told me as wife, this is what I have to do, that I will have 12 children, and it has to be me. So if it's in a situation where maybe the wife or the husband, there are still challenges of fruitfulness or childless, you say, oh no, it is me that God spoke to. I like something that I heard from a man of God in Nigeria, Bishop Ado. Once Fred Ado, he was preaching, and he said something about when he met his wife, when he was courting his wife, and the wife said, I don't want to, when he proposed, and the wife said, no, I don't want to mess up your life, I know I have all these conditions that it will make me not to have a child. But the man of God said, well then, you're very lucky, because God has promised me I will have 4 children. God has promised me I will have so many children. So that's the one we're taking.
Yeah.
So that thing that God said to him, he used it to counter the doubt that the lady he was going to marry was having.
Yeah.
Because he believed that once we have become one, the promise of God in my life is going to affect you. So no matter what the devil has put in your mind, you're not going to have this or whatever you see, because I dare say the lady is a good medical doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So she knew what she was talking about.
Okay.
But because the man of God held on to the word that God gave him, as he's not going to have a child all by himself.
No, it's not possible.
So since it is you that God has said I will marry, it means that these 4 children are going to come from us.
Yeah.
Whether it's 4, 3, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But these children number that God has given me are going to come from us. So when we have such situations, it's very important for us to remember that the promise of God is for us as a family, man
Yes.
and wife together.
Yes.
Not, I have to marry another wife for these 12 children to come forth.
Yeah.
Or no, I have to get rid of this man who is not able to father, whom you think is not able to father a child, so that I can have the 6 children or 5 children or 1 child that God has promised me.
Yeah.
We must remember that the promise of God to a family, that's through one or the other, that is through the wife or the husband, is for the family. Because the two have become one.
Yes.
The two have become one. So this is one thing that I'm able to pick from this. God spoke to them as one. And even when Abraham was having doubts in his mind, God became more explicit and said, no, it is Sarah, your wife, that will give you a son. Yeah. Not the Ishmael that you're already seeing.
Yes, and my covenant will be established.
And the covenant of God will be established. That's why he's the child of promise. Will be established through Isaac. And it is through him that the kings of many nations and all that will come. That's the covenant child. Yes. That will come. So we have to be very careful when God speaks to us. And we shouldn't just interpret it. Because the truth is, look at it, the head and the neck. The head cannot move without the neck, and the neck cannot decapitate the head and say, I'm moving in another direction. So the two have become one. And I think and God speaks to us in that manner. Yeah. In a relationship, in a marriage relationship.
Well, that's very good. And there isn't any more that will say that God talked to Abraham, and when he was talking to Abraham, he was in fact talking to the unit Abraham said, the unit husband and wife, because he considers husband and wife as one. When he makes a promise to the husband, he's making a promise to husband and wife. When he makes a promise to the wife, he's making a promise to husband and wife. It's easy to understand that with respect to children, because husband and wife have to come together in order to bear a child. But this, I believe, applies to every other kind.
It applies to every other kind of promise. God can bless the family through even in financial matters.
Yes.
He can say, I will make your family exceedingly wealthy, exceedingly prosperous in the things of finance. Yeah. And, if he says that, and maybe the prosperity is coming through the wife, it shouldn't be, this is my money, or this is, it is the promise that God has made to that family.
Yes.
And God can decide to liberate or to bless a family, either through both as a couple or through one person in the relationship, because in his sight, the two have become one.
Yes.
In his sight. And the moment we see things in the family like that, then there's nothing like, this is mine, this is yours, it is me that God spoke to about this. I'm not going to allow what God has put in my hands to fall to the ground because of your disobedience or because of your, all that kind of thing, or begin to look for other license and look at the person that you're married to and say, if God said, I mean, look at it this way. Abraham could have said, this woman cannot have a child anymore.
Yeah.
It's easier for a 100-year-old man to father a child than a 90-year-old woman to conceive a child.
Yes.
So he was going to continue with that mistake. But he could have said, let me go and marry another wife. Because God has said I will be a father of many nations. Let me go and get, it's not through this old woman I'm going to get this child. Mm-hmm. And he was actually thinking that way. Not to marry another wife, but that the woman will not be able to conceive. And God said, she's the one. So it's very important that we listen and obey God. And that is why God said, that every male child, should be circumcised to be a sign of this covenant. Yeah. A sign of that covenant, to your loyalty to that covenant. The loyalty to that covenant is very, very important. Yes. You have to be loyal to that covenant that God made with you. That's why it's a covenant. God will keep his side and you will keep your own side the way he has said. Yeah. He said it. So it's a short passage, but it's a very deep one for us to understand. Yes. The oneness or the unity. Yeah. In a marriage relationship.
Okay. Well, that's a very good passage, and as we know, every passage in the Bible is loaded with lessons, and depending on how we see it at a particular time, God reveals different messages. In this particular case, the message he has revealed to us is as how he considers husband and wife, and this comes out in his interaction with Abraham in the making of the covenant. We thank you for joining us in this Bible study, and we pray that you will learn something from this Bible study and from all the ones that are available from our website, that you learn something that will make a positive impact on your life and will bring you closer to God's purpose for your life. Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless you.